So generally, as I say, today's session is going to be looking at the various different strategies we might be able to employ with stress at work. So we'll look at employer responsibility, what those around you should be doing to enable that you're best supported to cope at work. We'll be looking at some strategies that we can all do to make our working lives a little less stressful. As I say, looking specifically at techniques to employ in the moment. We'll also have a little look at the kind of environments which really support well-being and some of the strategies and simple little changes we might be able to do there. And then there's a little section on what I call weaving your parachute, but I'll go on to explain what that is in more detail as we go through. So Sam's already introduced the housekeeping rules. So the structure of today, as I say, will be about half an hour of presentation, and then we'll go into some Q&A. So it's just important for us to be aware that the stress and our experience at work is recognised in the UK Health and Safety Executive Standards, and they have a whole host of documents explaining work-related stress and the responsibility of our employers to ensure that this is minimised as much as it can be. So when we talk about work-related stress, we're very much talking about the reaction that we have on some of the excessive pressures and various demands that are placed on us in our day-to-day work. And this is particularly well evidenced within a health and social care sector. These are renowned for being jobs that can be hugely rewarding because of the opportunity to care and make significant differences to people's lives. However, with that comes a lot of demand and a lot of responsibility. And, you know, according to the HSE, 17.9 million working days are lost. Were lost in 2019, 2020 as a result of stress, anxiety and depression, very much associated with work pressure. And occupational stress can have a whole host of mental and physical side effects. And the difficulty is if we feel too much pressure and too much stress over a period of time, then we can form mental and physical illnesses, including anxiety, depression, heart disease, back pain, alcohol, drug dependency, just to name a few that are mentioned in the HSE document. And it is worth remembering that employers do have a legal duty to protect workers from stress at work, and we're all entitled to a risk assessment, and it is the responsibility of the employer to act on the agreed actions that may come out of any such risk assessment. So we certainly are acknowledging that the environments in which we work and that our employment per se can be responsible for a lot of the stress we experience. However, you know, it's again, we need to think about what we can do in amongst all of that, because in the context of austerity, in the context of the pandemic, we know that our workloads just seem to be going up and up. Demands are not decreasing. So whilst we need to be liaising with our managers with regards to what they may be able to help us with, we also need to know what we can do, particularly in the moment if we are starting to feel really, really stressed and overwhelmed. Now, as a psychologist, I would be advocating that if you find yourself in a situation that is causing you a huge degree of distress and anxiety, the best thing you can do is remove yourself from that environment. However, as somebody that's worked in the NHS for over 10 years, I also know that that's not always possible. You know, we can be on a ward, we can be sitting in front of somebody, we can be in a meeting, and we can feel absolutely just overwhelmed and anxious, and running out of the room isn't an option. So in those moments, what we really need to be trying to do is to calm our nervous system. So when we experience those symptoms of anxiety, it is our sympathetic nervous system, the fight flight system, that comes online and starts to flood the body with a whole host of chemicals to prepare us to run away, to fight, freeze, or whatever we need to do in response to the anxiety. And what we need to try and do in these moments is bring online what we call our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite one, the one that allows us to rest and digest. So looking at some specific techniques for doing that, just waiting, yeah. So it's something I talk about all the time, and while it sounds really, really basic, the most effective way to calm ourselves in any moment is to increase the oxygen in our body, and we do this via breathing. Now, our brains are always listening out for messages from our bodies about what chemicals need to be sent out. So as you'll be aware, when we start to feel stressed, our heart rate quickens, and usually our breath becomes quicker and shallower. And this in itself sends a huge message to the brain that we are preparing for some kind of danger. And our pace of breathing is what triggers a whole host of other physiological changes that prepare us to go into fight or flight. And in these moments, if we can catch ourselves and alter our breathing, this can actually stop the sympathetic nervous system triggering and actually get us back calm. And there's a really popular breathing technique, and a lot of these breathing techniques have come out of research done by the Navy SEALs, for example, to help the Navy SEALs calm in very stressful situations. So, you know, these are very well researched and evidence techniques. And this 4-7-8 breathing is very much being inhaling to a count of 4, holding for a count of 7, and exhaling for a count of 8. So it literally is in for 4, hold, and exhale. And this is something that we can do often without anyone around us knowing that we are doing this. And a sort of rule of thumb with these kind of self-soothing breathing exercises are, if you can do 3 rounds of this, you will experience the physiological changes associated with your calming of your nervous system. And you know, you don't have to focus on I must hold for 4, I must hold for 7, exhale for 8. As long as we are concentrating on slowing the rate of our breathing and aiming to have an extended hold and aiming for our exhale to be longer than our inhale, that's primarily all we need to do to start our body calming to the point where our brain will believe we're coming out of threat. So this actual slowing of the system, this lengthening of the exhale, and including, you know, the breath coming right down to the belly, will slow down the heart rate, stabilize your blood pressure, and allowing a full exchange of oxygen to occur. And having enough oxygen in the body is essential to us being able to think more clearly, think more rationally, and to activate our parasympathetic nervous system. So I can't really emphasize the power of breathing as the most effective tool in any moment to actually really impact on your experience of anxiety in any given moment. But there are more as well. So I would always initially encourage the breathing. Now, I think what a lot of us are not aware of is how much our physical sensations inform our brain of how to feel in the moment. So I want to talk a bit about posture and the psoas muscle. Now, the psoas muscle is a very large muscle, and it's actually the muscle that connects, the only muscle that connects the top and the bottom half of the body. And the connections between the psoas muscle are made very closely by the diaphragm, and they literally connect our body and provide us with the ability to walk and to breathe. And these are really tightly connected to how we respond to fear and excitement. So your psoas muscle is the muscle that when we go into fight or flight contracts and pulls us into that fetal position, protecting the main organs and protecting everything that we perhaps don't want a charging saber-toothed tiger to get its teeth into. But what this means is that in our modern day lives, when we sit hunched over a computer or hunched over a steering wheel or looking down at our phone, what we're actually doing is we're holding our psoas muscle in the position in which our body is convinced that we are preparing for an attack, that we're in fight flight. And being in this position sends a huge, powerful message to the brain to activate the sympathetic nervous system, prepare to run, prepare to fight, you're under threat. So the way we sit, the hours we spend hunched over our computers or our steering wheel or our phones have a really, really big impact on how nervous and heightened and stressed we might feel during the day. So I'll just have a drink while that goes forward. I've gone a bit croaky. So during chronic periods of stress, so when we're at work perhaps and the demands just keep coming in and in, these psoas muscles are constantly contracted, and this sends this message, alert, alert. And as I say, these same contractions occur when we sit for long periods of time, or we do anything where we are pulling ourselves into this fetal position, and we are sending this physiological indicator that the brain will interpret as we are under threat. And this is one of the reasons that a lot of well-being strategies include posture, and certainly when we look at breathing practices and yoga and meditation, you may notice that there is always an emphasis on rolling the shoulders back, sitting up straight, and just gently tucking the chin. And this posture allows the front of the body and the neck to be exposed, and this posture in and of itself says to your brain, we must be okay. We would not be allowing ourselves to expose our areas of vulnerability if we were under threat. And so in moments of heightened awareness and anxiety, if we can sit up straight and take some deep breaths, it's just the quickest and most effective way of feeling calmer in the moment. So there are a few other strategies as well that I would recommend doing after, or at least at the same time of these. Smiling, again, it's all to do with this. The brain is listening and trying to work out where in our body the messages are coming from to say that we're okay. And there is so much research that has now been done that shows that if you pull your face into a smile, even if it's insincere, even if you feel incredibly anxious or unhappy, it will, the act of the smile will release endorphins that do start to relieve stress and also reduce the perception of pain as well. So as an aside, over the weekend I've had a really bad headache and I've been smiling to myself like a crazy lady. But it's at least made the experience of that, having that headache, a little easier to manage, because these endorphins are released. And this act of smiling is another one of these physiological indicators that's saying to your brain, I'm not under threat because I would not be smiling if I was in danger. And so again, it will release endorphins, it will slow down the heart rate, and it will stop the production of a lot of the stress hormones that flood our body when we're overwhelmed, like cortisol. And smiling alone has even been shown to temporarily reduce blood pressure. Excuse me. So just trying to be in sync. So yeah, so smiling triggers this neurochemical reaction, releasing specifically dopamine and serotonin. And dopamine is associated with an increase of feelings of happiness, and serotonin release is associated with a reduction of stress. And there is, again, so much research out there now that is saying that smiling can actually boost the immune system, and that's going to likely to be to do with the fact that we know chronic stress and overexposure to adrenaline and cortisol can be physiologically very demanding, whereas serotonin and dopamine is much more well received by the body. And there's even evidence to show that the impact of smiling, even if we don't mean it, is even more powerful if we can do that when looking in the mirror. And this is again why a lot of strategies for boosting mood include things like looking at yourself in the morning in the mirror and smiling. It can really start to set you up for the day, but certainly can help in moments even when you don't feel like it. If you can force a smile, it is worth doing. It's also really helpful for us to acknowledge how and where in time we are feeling as well. So certainly I know it's something that I've done, and certainly a lot of colleagues that I've met over the years working in healthcare, is it can feel really difficult to say I'm really stressed at work or I'm feeling really anxious in this moment. However, again, it can be so helpful for us to recognize how we're feeling, and maybe say to ourselves internally, I am really stressed at the moment. I am experiencing anxiety. Because again, what this does, it allows us to gain some perspective on the situation, acknowledging that it is not us that is anxiety, it is a transient experience, it's a feeling, it's not reality, it won't last forever. And the minute we name it, we diffuse a lot of its power to some degree. And some research has found that quite a lot of people find simply thought stopping techniques very effective. And by this, I mean, some individuals will actually say stop to their experience of anxiety in the moment, and that's enough to diffuse it. I mean, I do want to say with a lot of these particular strategies that are more cognitive in how you employ them rather than the physiological ones, not everything is going to work for everyone. I mean, you know, I personally, I don't know, I haven't tried, but I would personally guess that me saying stop to an experience of anxiety wouldn't work. I'm going to try it the next time I feel like it. But, you know, these are things, these are all strategies you can practice with and find what works for you. You know, we are all individuals and there is not a one size fits all approach. A really helpful thing we can do, though, is bring ourselves into the moment, because the majority of our experience of anxiety happens up in the head first, and we tend to go on a train of thought that happens primarily in our head. So having a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique can be a really helpful way to bring ourselves back into the moment. And this is what I mean about where we are feeling. So it's very difficult for us to cognitively attend to two things at the same time. So if I am naming 5 colours in my head that I can see around me, I couldn't do that while continuing this conversation. And the same happens in your head. So straight away you disrupt that train of thought and allow yourself to choose to come into the moment, where we often start to breathe again and realize that actually we're okay. We may be feeling anxious, but in this moment everything is okay. And we can count down, so we can name 5 colours, we can then name 4 things we can touch, we can name 3 things we can hear, 2 things we can smell, and if we end on notice something you can taste, that might prompt you to take a sip of water or a cup of tea, and again just allow you to have a moment to collect your thoughts. And again, this is something that I haven't tried, but the research is very compelling for. And this is, think about something funny, referred to as humour visualisation. And if you have a personal experience or a particular comedy sketch that never fails to make you laugh, make you smile, it can be really helpful to practice rehearsing bringing that to mind, because again it has been shown that if we think about something funny and actually feel the associated emotions of joy or pleasure, our anxiety will reduce, because it's very difficult for us to have both systems of rest and digest and fight and flight online at the same time. And the research shows that if we're actually able to make ourselves laugh when bringing something funny to mind, that the subsequent contraction and expansion of the facial muscles will send again messages up to the brain that reduces physical anxiety, starts to reduce the production of cortisol. So if we can notice and name and act in the moment when things are really stressful, we do have the ability to change how we are feeling, which in itself I think is really helpful to know, because it can often feel very, very much outside of our ability to do so. But all of these things are more effective the more we practice them, and the more we practice them before we need them. Just wait for the next slide. So it's really helpful for us to know how to change how we're feeling in the moment. However, if we can, in collaboration with our employers, do more about supporting our health and well-being generally all of the time, then that is likely to lead to us not feeling so overwhelmed. So I wanted to talk a little bit about creating environments that support well-being, and I have put where possible at the top, because we all work in a whole host of different environments at the moment. You know, if we're working on a ward, we cannot do a lot of what I'm recommending, suggesting here. You know, if we're spending hours in our car on community visits or working in a residential care environment. But there are certainly ways that we can try and bring some of these elements into our working day. I mean, there are so many research studies now that show the benefits of having plants on desks, on windowsills, research studies that show that patients heal quicker from surgery if they can see plants. But incredibly, it's even been shown that having artificial plants or even pictures of nature will also, not to the same degree, but will also benefit people's well-being. So this might be something as simple as having a wallpaper on your desktop or on your phone of a nature scene that you find calming. Hydration is really essential to all of our health and well-being, every aspect of it. And I know that, again, working in some environments, I will go hours without having a drink, and it's really not very good for us at all. So as much as we can, again, taking some personal responsibility for how am I going to find the space and the time to ensure that I am hydrated. And caffeine is not going to help in us striving to be more hydrated. Ideally, water. It's not as exciting to me personally as a jug of filter coffee, but I know which one makes me feel better. Having a bright and natural workspace can really support mood and productivity. So again, you know, these are sessions that I really hope start to trigger some conversations about the working environments that we find ourselves in, and where there is any opportunity to make these more beneficial. I really think we need to be recognizing the benefit that this has on the whole of the workforce, but also not just in terms of health, but on workplace productivity. It's a no-brainer, really, that these environments should start to be looking at more comprehensively. Like a pleasant smelling work environment. Now I have a little bottle of lavender oil at work, and I put a couple of drops on my chair when I get in, and it really does just brighten the environment. I have a lot of people walk past the office and it's like, oh, it always smells so nice in here. And it's, you know, we notice these things. Our senses are always feeding back to the body, to the brain, about how safe and comfortable we feel in an environment. So it's these little things, again, that can make a significant difference to how we feel at work. We don't always have the opportunity to get up and walk about, again, in some of the roles that we do, but there is so much research to suggest that sitting all day is considered the new smoking. You know, it will impact detrimentally on our longevity. So we need to be thinking more about, can we have a sit standing desk, or can I stand up and do a Teams call while standing? There are some gadgets that we can get that we can keep under desks that allow us to at least exercise. There are chair yoga sessions I know that the Trust has done, and these are all things that we can do while we continue to do our work, but are making such a difference to our physical selves. And if we can't get up and have sit standing desks, then ensuring again that we take just a few moments an hour to do a lap of the office or walk up and down a set of stairs, because this is just going to move the oxygen around the body, and the chemicals like cortisol that if is not moved around will sit and contribute to this sense of stress. So the other thing, it can be really difficult to acknowledge, but it, you know, again, it's very well documented, is that how we experience our external world is, at least in some part, a manifestation of our internal world and our mindset. And managing stress at work can be partially about our mindset, because our outlook has a huge impact on our ability to cope with our everyday stressors. And one of the things that it can be really helpful to ask ourselves is, you know, who is responsible for our state of well-being in this moment? And I would really hope that our answer is ourselves. You know, it has to be us. Our health and well-being is far too important, well, certainly I feel mine is far too important, to hand over to somebody else. And, you know, we have within us this capacity to question the narratives that run our own lives. We cannot give our responsibility of looking after our physical and mental health to anyone else. And it's certainly a responsibility, you know, that employers have, but it needs to be a joint venture. And this is why I talk about weaving our parachutes, because John Kabat-Zinn, who is a very well-renowned mindfulness teacher and developed the MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction program, uses this metaphor in that we would not wait until we are about to jump out of a plane until we start weaving our parachute. So ensuring that we are getting the right nutrition, that we're exercising, that we're getting out in nature, that we're having enough sleep and rest, that we're meditating, that we're connecting with others. All of these, what, you know, the basics, the very basic things we need to do as human beings in our everyday life. If we're getting these right, then anything else we do on top of that is really strengthening our ability to cope with everyday stressors. We're really weaving a parachute. So when we come to very, very difficult and overwhelming demands, we know that this is our foundation. And once we have these basics, there is still, you know, a bit more we can do, such as enhancing the mindset that we go through life with. So I mean, I've got loads of research studies should anybody want to actually have a look at the data with regards to some of this. But one of the most powerful things that we can do to improve our mental well-being, and potentially, according to some studies, even lengthen our lives, is to simply name 3 things a day that we are grateful for. And these can be, I've woken up, you know, I'm in a bed, I have an environment in which I can access food and water, I can see the sky. You know, it's about acknowledging the things that we do feel grateful for, and writing down 3 of those a day can have a really powerful cumulative impact on us. Resisting perfectionism is another one, and I've certainly talked about in previous workshops this striving for perfectionism and an association with burnout. And this is something that's, again, very common in the caring professions, because we hold a huge degree of responsibility, you know, often life and death, and there are real consequences to making mistakes. So we really push ourselves for this perfectionism. But conversely, what actually happens is, if we continue to strive to this level, is we're more likely to increase our stress levels, decrease our self-worth, and make mistakes. So it's very much about acknowledging when we're doing enough and resisting that pull to perfectionism. And we are all working in environments in which we have very little control over, you know, and I think the recent experiences of the pandemic and how much we've had to change how we work and what the expectations of us are, means that, you know, this is another source of anxiety. But this anxiety is often associated with uncertainty, and usually uncertainty about future events. And these are completely outside of our control. So if we can, by bringing ourselves into the moment, trying the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 techniques, meditating, naming how we're feeling, if we can start to bring our focus more onto what is in our control, it can alleviate a lot of really unhelpful anxiety about things that we can do absolutely nothing about. And this is all achievable by noticing and practicing. These aren't things that are going to happen overnight. We need to bring an awareness to where our mind is, and then bring ourselves back to, hold up, I can't do anything about that just now. What do I need to do in this moment? What is in my control? And so we have the employer's responsibility in terms of ensuring that we are risk assessed, and anything that needs to be done as a result of that assessment is acted on. We have a whole host of things we can do, primarily physiologically in the moment, to calm down as we need to. We have a lot of things we can do when we leave work to ensure that our mental and physical well-being is tended to, and that will not only improve our experiences outside of work, but improve our ability to cope with the demands of work. But all that being said, it is still essential for us to seek support at work if we feel that we're doing everything and things are still too much. And it's a really courageous thing to do, because unfortunately there is still stigma around terms such as burnout or stress or anxiety, but these are not indicative that the individual experiencing them has got any fault. You know, this is what happens when people work above and beyond what is reasonable for a long period. And it is imperative that you talk to someone to prevent the situation getting worse. And, you know, in the first instance, that should be your line manager. However, if you feel that the pressure is due to your line manager, then find out who else you can be speaking to and what policies might be in place to deal with this, because there are increasingly areas of support all over the place that we can seek support from. And this might be a union or workplace representative, could be the HR department, staff support, wellbeing leads, hubs, your GP. You know, we need to recognise when we need help and get better at ensuring that we ask for it, because sometimes we need more